our baseline should be joy. Every breath, when we take a breath with intention, and there has to be some intention there. If you're paying attention to your breath, and of course, the word respiration comes from re-spiriting. When you breathe with attention, you are re-spiriting your whole body. You're sending spirit or chi or prana, whatever you want to call this special stuff that's out there. When you breathe with intention, you pull down this vital force that we can call chi or spirit or prana. So he's saying that when you breathe with that, you're feeling joy. You're feeling and I translated it as deity, but it was really the goddess. That's the goddess herself of the world. So in other words, when that to me inspired me so much. Who would inhale? Who would exhale if this ether were not joy? So that every time you just breathe, even 2 breaths, you're turning yourself on. You're getting that joy. You're getting those endorphins. They didn't know the word endorphins, but they knew the word joy. So you're making yourself feel good, and that is your duty. That's not like self-indulgence. No, your duty is to feel good so that your body will work better and you can be a better citizen of the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to Far Out with Faust. I am Faust Chicho, in case you got lost and stumbled upon this program here. And today I am delighted to be joined by Dr. Kathleen Rosenblatt. Is Rosenblatt or Blatt? Am I saying it right? Is it?
You're saying it perfect. Either way.
Okay, perfect.
It means
So let me tell you about
Rosebud.
Is that what it means? Rosebud? Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, it's my former married name. I was raised Irish, German, Catholic, but I married Rosenblatt.
Okay.
So
it fits you. So let me tell you a little bit about the good doctor, and then you'll have an idea what we'll be talking about. She is the co-founder of the first acupuncture clinic in the country at UCLA, and she is the author of 2 double CDs which encompass, the titles are Practical Cellular Meditation and Veteran Stress Release for PTSD. And she's also the author of a book of Rene Damal. I believe he's French, right? Damal, The Life and Work of a Mystic Guide. And this contains material on mind-body practices from the Hindu philosophy and the 20th century's best spiritual guides. We're going to talk about this book that she wrote. And she focuses on the spiritual dimension of health. And she specializes in treating depression and panic disorders and instructing individuals to become proactive in reversing these chronic syndromes. And we're going to get into it. Thank you so much for beaming in, Doc. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here.
So let's we were just talking before I formally introduced you, and you were telling me about what you've learned. Can you just tell me once again what about this book you wrote and what you learned?
Yes, when you live long enough, all these strands of your life sort of all come together. So I had been a French major. I went to the University of Connecticut. I spent a year in France, and my doctoral thesis for French, actually Comp Lit, was about this author, this French surrealist, psychic, Sanskritist writer from the 20s and 30s. He died in the 40s, René Damal. And he started learning Sanskrit at age 13 and translated all these beautiful texts that I just loved reading about, that were from 500 BC and 1200 BC. And so I learned so much about being, the importance of really being in the body. And then he became a follower of G.I. Gurdjieff in Paris in the 20s and 30s. And and Gurdjieff is a rather unknown but very interesting teacher who felt that the importance was connecting the brain and the body. So he really developed this idea of mindfulness, even though he never used that term himself. But he was talking about being present in the moment and being present in the body. So the fact that Damal was influenced by Hinduism and wonderful theories in that tradition, they have this wonderful term called rasa, R-A-S-A, and it means the experience of being present in the moment when you are creating art or observing art or, writing a poem or reading a poem, but especially when you're connected to art. So this was the sacred role of art, not to distract us and not to have to be a drunk writer in order to make good writing, but to really be a present writer. So there was all this idea of being present in the body. Even before Domal met Gurdjieff, he was already very, very aware of this. And because he was so psychic and so sort of spiritual, but also a kind of a renunciant in Paris, he was just ready for all these experiences. So it was all about getting out of the head and incorporating the head into the body. And I felt that through various forms of practice, I really developed even further this idea of meditating with the whole body, because we have 70 trillion cells, and every one of them has a little brain and a little emotional center and an incredible intelligence. So then we have these communities, the shoulder community, the liver community, the knee community. They're very smart. They work together. They maintain a knee, they maintain a liver, and there's such an intelligence. And once you start really meditating, and I developed ways of being able to go inside and really feel and communicate with these little critters, these little holograms of me, that we all have. Every cell is a hologram of the whole. So it's been very, very amazing. As an acupuncturist, I've always been working on sore necks and shoulders and colitis, but finally I became a specialist in anxiety and depression, because everyone has these layers of stress over all these physical problems. And once you start getting them to connect with their body and get high, literally, because in every cell there are 100 receptor sites for feel-good opiates that our body is producing. The endocannabinoids and the endorphins and the dopamine, they're in every cell of the body. So nature or God or the universe intended us to be feeling really good, so that we would be better citizens of the universe and of the planet. So we're supposed to feel good. But unfortunately, we have held suffering as being noble and pleasure as being questionable, instead of just developing this pleasure internally and not needing to go to the store, go to the priest or the rabbi, or chocolate cake or sex or a movie or something out there where we're spending money. That's what the program was, is spend money and give someone else your power. So that's a lot, a big mouthful, but that's sort of where it's all wound into.
These are amazing. It reminds me, I just got back from a workshop with Greg Braden, and Greg Braden is always talking about the holographic universe, and this workshop focused on releasing trauma from the body, and we did these incredible breathwork sessions, and he spoke about something that I know that you also speak about, how we get this trauma stuck in our body, and it's if memory serves me, it's neuropeptides that this trauma gets stuck in, and because the body's like, I don't know what to do with this, I'm just going to store it for now, and hopefully we can, joy and these other emotions that are lighter, they're easier metabolized, but some of the trauma and things get stuck, and that's what he was teaching us, how, like, the science behind that. And I feel like it relates to what you're saying, but also to go back to what you said about us as human beings, and Greg Braden said this so eloquently, and I've read it, and it resonates with me so much. We're not meant to see some of the things that we see. We are true. I believe humanity is very good natured and very good at heart. And I believe that we're living in a society that is not conducive to that good nature, and that teaches us that we're something that we're not, and in fact keeps us from the truth of what we are. And I think it does that through this constant bombardment of horror, news, trauma, but I
And
believe what you, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the craziest thing right there. My most peacenik friends will still watch these horrific movies.
Game of Thrones and
I mean, Game of Thrones was so beautiful, but I couldn't watch it. I mean, I
no,
couldn't watch someone having their eyes gouged out, you know. And
head chopped off. And,
I will not watch anything that has a gun or that has, even if they're arguing, unless they're
yeah,
maybe, if it's a period piece and they're in a beautiful, then I'll watch it. If they're
yeah.
using swords or something, maybe I'll watch it. But otherwise, I will not. So I miss out on a lot of great movies because they're all so horrible.
Listen, I was a filmmaker, and I know I feel I can't. I guess I've become fragile, but I don't think of it like that. I just don't want to feed my soul with that. Like I tried going back to the way I was, and I'm like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like I'm like watching these shows, and my whole everything is thrown off, and I'm like trying to sleep, and I'm upset with myself for having watched this horrible shit. Was it thrilling? Yeah, it was thrilling. It was great. My favorite character was killed by his sister. Fantastic. The acting was great. I was an actor and a filmmaker. I still am to a degree, but I can't. I just don't have it in me to watch those shows anymore, and I have no interest in watching them. And it's crazy because that was my world. I was a filmmaker and an actor, and a good one at that. I trained. I have a master's. I've been on stage. I've been on films. I've been on TV. And it doesn't go away. It's not like I stopped. But at the same time, I just don't. I don't want to. I mean, Christopher Reeve played a paraplegic right before he became a paraplegic. I mean, and people don't understand the way the universe works. This role, he was so dedicated to. He went all out, and he was like, I think his greatest fear was that this would happen to him. And what happened to him right after he finished the movie? His
I didn't
greatest
know about that
fear.
film. Right? He got to be Superman, and now
Oh my
paraplegic.
God! I mean, he should have stuck with Superman.
Yeah.
But it's
I
just,
find that
it's like,
the turning point was Bonnie and Clyde, which is a movie I did love, I have to admit. But that's when violence became style. They added style to violence, and that was a turning point where he made it so cool that these characters were so modern and so cool and so beautiful that from then on, violence was okay.
mm-hmm. And a lot of people argue that it's part of our nature, and I'm like, yeah, but maybe, but it's the small part, and we glorify it, and we cinematize it, and we stylize it, and we make it so cool, And they do. They've gotten really good at making it so cool. Everyone's favorite movie is The Matrix, and I love that movie, but it's violent. I mean, I wouldn't. It's violent in a way that it's just a lot of gunplay,
I was just reading
violent.
about the latest John Wick film in this LA Times this morning, and it was like, I love Keanu, but it's like they described the film as being one violent scene after another, but really well done. Oh, great!
Yeah, I've never watched a John Wick. I guess I'm out of the loop.
I mean,
I never got into them. I haven't seen one of them, and I love Keanu. Yeah. So back to sorry, we went off on a tangent, but
it is the most critical thing, I think, on the planet. The fact that this is what people do for fun. I mean, they complain about war, but for fun, they want to see people smashing each other. So there's something really cuckoo about our whole planet, and that's when I feel like I'm really from another planet.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, we literally, our children, like I have a 9 and 11-year-old, and like I look at what they're watching, and I know it's what all the kids are watching, and I'm like, do you think that this is good for your brain to be watching Power Rangers? You know what I mean? Like, not only is it mindless, and it's just kung fu, but it's just nonstop, and there's no, I know the good guys are fighting the bad guys, but it's just like, it's nonstop spectacle, kung fu nonsense. I mean, and it's, look, I watched shows like that in the 80s. Okay. But at least at the end of the 20 minutes, He-Man was like, he would break the fourth wall and give a moral lesson of, and he's like, and that's why, I mean, the cartoons were geared at least to give kids, an idea of right and wrong, and not just kind of, nonstop violence for the sake of it. He-Man never even punched anyone. Okay. He just threw people, which is funny to watch these days.
Well, I think that this is emblematic of how people are not in their bodies. They're just looking for another impression, another stimulus. They're never enjoying the pleasure of really turning on these endorphins by themselves and having the power over their own body to be so centered that they're in bliss. But they have no taste really for bliss. They might think they want to have a drink or a smoke or something to get into bliss, but they have the capacity to have bliss by themselves, and yet they'd rather just be stimulated by something out there.
So it's like an addiction,
it's just,
right? I mean, it's literally like the symptoms that I see on display. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm completely exempt from this. I'm, I catch myself doing it, reaching for my phone if I have a moment. And I have my litany of excuses, but my behavior resembles the same thing I see in my children and everyone else. I start to get like, you start to get fidgety and you're looking, but like I look at my kids and I'm like, how can I get them to understand that it's of the utmost importance that they be okay in their bodies, right? Because both of them, they're 9 and 11, and they have no ability to just sit, right? I mean, one has a little bit of hyperactivity, and the other one would rather bounce around the room in general. My 9-year-old will sit and breathe when he has to. He'd be like, and he'll just breathe. Like we've taught him that, and he can settle himself into his body like that, at least for a while. Now my 11-year-old is all over the place. I mean, just to get him to be still is the challenge. And I'm like, I'm trying to work with him, and part of me wants to drag him to a monastery for 6 months and just make him sit on a mountain with me, but I know I can't do that.
Well, what I've done is had 18, 19-year-olds in a circle, and I get them breathing in this particular way where you're really pumping and you're finally breaking through. And if you tighten the eyes and tighten the seat muscles, it's almost as if you're squeezing the two poles so that it forces your brain to shut up, the chatter brain to sort of just calm down until you start to feel this kind of airy, airheady feeling all through your body. And then by the time we finish the circle, these kids will say to me, "Oh my God, I never thought I could be so stoned. I could feel so high." I mean, they feel like they've had a glass of champagne, or they've had a smoke, because they just feel like that we can create that feeling in the body where you just feel good. And feeling good is what propels us towards everything we do, whether it's buying a new shirt or buying whatever we do. We always are doing it to feel good. If we go skiing or go swimming or whatever we do for fun, we want to feel good. And if people could realize that they can just feel good and be really connected, and that is what nature, nature is just trying to get us to do, because that's when we are being organic life and we're connecting the planet with the sun. And that's sort of our role on this planet, is that we're this sort of connecting thing. And when you're so centered like that, and then I would have them feel the magnetism coming up from the planet, which we're just bombarded with magnetism from the planet. And then feel the energy coming down from all these ions and bions from the sun. And you start mixing it together in your belly, and wow, you just feel like you're, Superman, Superwoman.
It's so powerful.
And that's what our job is. That's our job, is just to feel good and do that.
I love that. So with my kids, And don't get me wrong, I get my 11-year-old will sit and meditate with me, and I'll be like, he's like, how long? And I'm like, we're just gonna do 15 minutes, and then we'll do 25. And I'm like, how long do you think it was? And he's like, 15 minutes. I was like, no, it's 25. He was like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, you see that? um, I do get him to sit with me, and he will meditate. When I can rope him into it. It's tough with our schedule right now, but like, so the breathing that you're talking about, if I was to sit him down and do an exercise with him, what would you say would be a great way to kind of start him off, or like in the setting, and what kind of breathing for someone who's that young?
Well, just by, breathing calmly for a moment. But then my favorite thing that really gets me going is, I used to do it later, but now I just start off with it, which is this, really blowing out and tightening the eyes and tightening the seat muscles, the Kegel muscles, and just shaking the fingers. Because you want to move this, because we always have this stuck energy right here. And this is supposed to be the solar plexus. This is supposed to be a sun, a solar energy coming out from here. And instead, it's usually like a big box TV running reruns of all the problems I've ever had and all the broken hearts. And, we're all the heroine or hero of our novel, and all these things that are why I am the way I am. And so when I can just break that open and reestablish this sun, this solar energy going through my body and then out to other people. But the way to get it I'm all bunched up. So when I do that,
so it's an exhale, and it's all the air out of the lungs, and then
blowing out, really, just tightening the eyes out, and
tightening the eyes, tightening your glutes, or your butt, your sits muscles,
right.
And then as you're blowing, you expel all the air, and then what is the inhale like?
Well, just breathing in, but then, noticing that I'm starting to feel really airy. I'm feeling like, wow, all this energy in my body, and it feels good. And, and then you just do that maybe 5 or 6 times and feel that glow, because you've just pumped a lot of energy through your body and replaced a lot of that worry and just, that chit chat. And then after you feel that and just continue to resonate with that and just enjoy it, just enjoying this high. And then I would end with pulling the energy down from the sun. And somehow the movement of the arm really helps. I mean, you could think about pulling the energy down from the sun, but if you actually do this movement, it's a Qigong energy.
Qigong, I was going to say,
very common energy. But you're really gathering it up, and in your mind, in your heart, you feel that you're gathering this perfect love, this perfect energy from the sun, because we're always looking for love, but everyone is so imperfect. Even our, the love of your life, or your grandmother, or whoever it is, they're still imperfect, the human beings. We can never get what we really want. From the sun, we can get perfect love. We can get our own store of energy, so that we become so fulfilled and so self-completed and self-contained that is a very attractive thing to other people. You'll probably get love from other people because you're so self-sufficient. There's nothing more unattractive than a needy person, and it usually shows right away. And we all need love, but if we can get our source of energy from the sun first, then human love is like the cherry on top of the sundae. I mean, that's just great if we can get that. But first, to get fed every day. And throughout history, they understood that. All these groups that we think of being so pagan understood the energy
primitive,
of the sun.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, yes. And so they all felt, we feel it. We don't talk about it, but we feel that energy, and we get it, and we feel that, and so then our whole body, we've taken care of all our babies. When people talk about love yourself, I never understood what that really meant. I mean, it's like everyone loves themselves plenty. Everyone's in love with themselves. But to really love yourself, for me, became loving my innards and feeling it like part of my family, we instead of I. And I love you, and I want to take care of you, and I'm not going to dump all this stress on you.
Yeah.
I'm going to spare you all from all this stupid stress that comes up from here, and ego, and I'm so tired of what is it, boundaries and self self-esteem.
Yeah.
Simple question. Simple word. Self-esteem. Okay, self-esteem is important, but it's been gone way over the top now of the entitlement and everything that people just are so concerned about.
Oh, yeah, they've taken advantage of it.
Right.
That's part of some of those systems I mentioned at the start. But I mean, self-esteem is key, but that is something that you teach, and a young person integrates that. It is vital for kids to have that growing up. But then there comes a point when, it's being used for, I don't want to say political purposes, but certainly an agenda that is tied to, the politics and the kind of division campaigns that happen in our society. And that's exactly what they are. They're designed to keep people, outraged, distracted,
Absolutely.
and divided. Yeah. I mean, clearly some of these things are we're really, we're giving 7-year-olds the autonomy to decide whether they can have an operation and change their sex. The only way that is allowed into a society is if you want to outrage people, particularly parents, at least parents who have not been completely brainwashed into oblivion, into this, quote, progressive thinking. Because 7-year-olds, this is something that they can't be trusted with. I don't care what anyone says. They don't, they don't have any kind of sense in that regard. They don't have the brain power to,
and their body
decide,
developed, let alone their mind or their emotions. Nothing's developed yet. It's not that they couldn't have gender issues, but now it's trending. Now it's a fad. Now it's like, oh yeah, I think I'll be a boy today, or I'll be a girl.
And it's being incentivized by the pharmaceutical companies who are looking to reap profits off these puberty blockers. The plastic surgeons are being incentivized to approve it. The Pentagon doctors just came out today and said that they believe 7-year-olds do have the ability to decide whether they could have gender surgery or not. And I'm like, so if you're 17 and you get a tattoo, your parents can be arrested. But if you're 7 and you get they're removing parts of these kids' bodies. That's legal and there's consent. How is that not divisive? How is that not insane? You know what I'm saying? It's all to divide and distract.
And I read one of these doctors saying, this is horrible because these kids I'm not allowed to advise them, and parents can be thrown in jail if they try to influence them. And yet these kids come back to me later and say, why did you let me do this?
Yeah.
Why didn't someone stop me? They're having all kinds of physical issues, but it's just a trend. Everyone has trouble when they're an adolescent, and so you go through problems and you think it's going to be cured by being a boy or being a girl when you weren't.
Yeah, no, and it's just, it's so complicated, and it's not, but they've made it very complicated. And I see these fathers with their arms around, their daughter's sons. And, they're speaking about their children's suffering. And I'm like, dude, you are the only one suffering. I don't know what kind of healing that you are attempting to accomplish with this, but this is not the answer. This is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. What you're doing to your daughter, son right now. What I forgot what sex it started with.
I can certainly talk about problems with pharmaceuticals because for even more general things, because I used to think, I've been doing this for so many decades, and I used to think of Western medicine as kind of kindergarten compared to Chinese understanding of the body, because they had thousands of years And, what we consider conventional medicine is very new, where you just deal with symptoms and you just try to cover them up. It's kind of like having the light on your dashboard that says engine needs help. And Western medicine is like getting rid of that signal on your dashboard. Who cares where the headache came from? Who cares what's causing the headache or the problem in the car? Let's just get rid of that thing on the light, on the dashboard. Whereas Chinese, like for instance, I brought this poster forward here, which shows the ear. And the ear is an outcropping of the brain. And so, you can't quite see this, but these are organs. Here's the head, the skull, and the spine, and the arms and the legs. And then over here they show the internal organs, like, the liver and the kidneys. And so you can treat these various parts of the body by treating the ear, because it's like having a way into the brain. Yeah. So you're treating these things very, very, the ear is an outcropping of the brain. And up here they can show how even it looks like a baby upside down. In other words, they discovered that my arm doesn't reach there, but here's the baby's head and it's curled up. And so here's the baby's internal organ, brain. And so it's just amazing what you can do by treating the ear. Here's the spine, this low back here, but especially for things like smoking and addictions and emotional overeating, there's really good points for things like that, where you're fixing the brain center for appetite, and you're fixing the brain center for addictive behaviors. And so to think that we can do that, that there's so many microcosms in the body. The hand is a microcosm. This is the face, and this is the intestines, this is the genitals, this is the leg, the leg and the arm. And so there's so many ways of treating, and I'll use magnets on the hands. So for people that don't like needles, even though the needles don't hurt, and I was very, very sensitive to, shots growing up, and the acupuncture needles don't hurt at all because they go in so fast that you don't get that 1-2 count. Like when you prick your finger, it doesn't hurt right away. It's like a 1-2 count, sends a message up to the brain and comes back, and then it says, ow. And so that doesn't happen because this goes through the skin so quickly that it doesn't get that message to the brain. So there's so many ways of treating the body. And when I give lectures, it's usually the human electromagnetic laser body, because these meridians have all the characteristics of a laser beam. So when people get it, that their body is really laser beams and electromagnetic fields, then acupuncture makes sense to them. Otherwise, they just think it's this woo-woo weird thing.
They don't understand it.
It must. Yeah. But when you realize that you've got these lines of energy connecting your organs, there's the lung meridian, the large intestine meridian, and the stomach meridian. And these are lines that go, just the ones along the skin are what we actually treat, but then they go internally too, and they connect with these organs, so that you're actually doing very specific manipulations of the energy. For instance, if you have too much energy in your stomach, so you've got heartburn, it's so hot, you can pull that energy via certain points to feed the intestines and feed the lungs. So you can help deficient lungs by pulling from the heartburn excess to the deficient lungs. So you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak. And so there's just so many things that acupuncture does as a science. And then I do a lot of massage. That's really important. And people, need to be touched. And doctors are touching their patients less and less with every decade. Now they're just looking at the computer. They're not even looking at you. They're just over here taking notes. Where, so many people have come to me and say, my God, you're the first person that's actually touched my shoulder, my sore rotator cuff.
Not allowed to touch anymore. It's
nuts.
It's crazy to me. We thrive on, we need that touch. I mean, human beings need to be touched by other human beings, and part of us revels in it, and part of us revels in doing it. And so the more we put these rubber gloves on and cover ourselves, and we are disconnecting from our natural human state in all these things, and it's all fear-based. And it's like, it's crazy. It goes back to like some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, you know, like
Mhm.
how much can we disconnect and divide these people in order to keep control of them?
That's
Um,
right.
yeah, that's the other things that I talk about on my podcast, but we're not going to get into that. We have too much good stuff to get into.
Right.
um,
But this
but
digital, the Zoom has been wonderful. I've treated so many patients on Zoom. You know, I can give them the magnets they need, and I can
mhm,
look at their tongue. Looking at the tongue is amazing because the tongue is very diagnostic. You know, the liver's around the edge, and the tip is the nervous system, and the
mm,
intestines.
I'm
So many
afraid to show you my tongue.
so many people have what they call leaky gut. And so if you look at the back of your tongue, if you see little bumps on the very, very back of your tongue, that shows leaky gut. Well, just about every tongue I look at has those bumps because the
Mm,
walls of our intestine are so thin. It's one cell thick. And in between the cells, the mortar kind of breaks down. So then things get into the walls of your intestine
mhm,
before they're supposed to. And that's what causes everything from depression to inflammation to pain, because our gut is so, compromised by all the junk we eat. And
yeah,
it's really, we're just all, and the gut has so much to do with everything because we're really
yes,
like um, a Noah's Ark. We have more critters in us than us.
I
We're
know.
just carrying all this good and bad bacteria, and it wreaks havoc. And it's sort of like the second brain down there.
It wreaks havoc because there's a constant. I mean, there's a natural state, and it's funny to me when people are like, "Well, you've got too much bad bacteria." I'm like, dude, if I have 50 trillion bacteria, how how can you tell which part of the 50 trillion are good and which part are bad? And if your intention is to target the bad, tell me exactly how you're going to do that. Because when I look into the sky and I see 50 trillion stars, and you ask me to pick the ones that are bad, I'm going to have a little bit of a challenge ahead of me. And so, I don't want your antibiotics unless I'm on death's door with an infection. Like I don't believe that they truly know what they're talking about, because I know there needs to be a balance. Okay. And I know we know more about how that balance is achieved now than ever, but we also know more about what is breaking down that the mesh in the lining and it's the chemicals. The United States is one of the worst countries in the world that we allow things that have been illegal for a decade in Europe, that are still on the shelves,
Right.
sodas, and not even to get into the products that we
Yeah.
sell, that we spray on the yard. And it's atrocious. And then we wonder why we are one of the sickest populations. It's like,
Right.
I mean, hello, it
Well,
should be
people,
obvious by now.
we've all heard them complain about the status of our soil, but it really is true. And one of the best products that I've used in various different brands, but is humic fulvic acid, which is the trace minerals that are about 200 feet deep and about 1,000,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They're trace minerals. Here, I have a bottle here that come from so deep down that it's when our planet was pristine. So these trace
Yes.
minerals are so
They
clean.
have to go deep for them. I
This thing,
use,
well,
I use Zach Bush's, biome, it's called, or it's called ion or biome, but
I'm
it's
not.
the liquid. But it is exactly what you're talking about. It's the
I mean, I've knocked out really virulent genital herpes, and where
wow.
it's not completely gone, but it's no longer virulent. It's not even happening, and yet
Right.
it's still dormant in the body. But it's this thing that stops the replication of viruses, and so
Yeah,
that's huge because a virus has to be in a host. It has to
that's
be in
right.
a cell, and so it won't jump to another cell and another cell if it doesn't replicate. And so it helps with the good and the bad bacteria, and really good
It
minerals. And so I just use that every day myself. And then if
Me
I have
too.
a problem, I'll up it a whole lot.
That's exactly what I do too. And people don't understand that viruses are, that basically everyone on the planet has been exposed to an array of viruses, including the ones that they probably fear the most, that
Mhm.
have been, but you can be exposed to a virus and not contract a virus. Now, does that mean it's not laying dormant in your system? Not necessarily. It can be in your system, right? And then what happens is it comes out, during one of the most stressful times of your life. All of a sudden, like
And
during
there's
a
even
pandemic.
viruses, like good bacteria. There's good viruses. They do things for us.
That's right. They must be, or they wouldn't be in the body, and there wouldn't be life on this planet without them. So, we've created this pathological myth around something that if the body didn't have, it would not be walking the planet, right? I mean, that's a fact. No viruses, no humans. No viruses, no life on Earth. So it's amazing to me how we take what is essential, like viruses, carbon, things that are essential to life, and we put targets on them and we make them the enemy. And I'm like, what is going on? How do we get so confused? Because viruses are not the enemy. We have far more viruses in our body that are serving us than we do the ones that they claim are killing us, right? I mean, is that not safe to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Maybe it's not safe to say these days, but I think it's true.
Well, I just try to advise people to go to what is stupidly called alternative medicine, because it really is the eternal classic.
First, yeah.
And this business of just using a drug, is really the new kid on the block that is just an idiot. I mean, yeah. I'm not saying there are no good drugs, but I'm saying that no one is looking at the entire body. And the worst thing is to have specialists, because the specialists, you go to a different building for your renal problems and a different building for your pulmonary problems. And these specialists only look at their little part of the body. They're not looking at other parts. Whereas the Chinese, they truly do see how the stomach affects the lungs, and the lungs affect the kidney, and the kidney affects the liver, and the liver feeds the heart. That's called the law of 5 elements, how these organs feed each other. And it's not how the food goes through the body. It's totally different, but it really works. So that the science is so, and I tell people, even if they had one treatment, sometimes the first treatment is the most dramatic, especially changing that mental, emotional thing that can just really shift, getting them to relax and get into the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's amazing how much happens in one treatment. Sometimes you need a series and you need to get the body in a new rut. But, and the emotions, when you work on the whole thing, the whole caboodle with emotions and the brain and the body, it's amazing what you can change. I mean,
so when you work with people, do you, I'm sure you have people you work with on a regular basis, or some people come in and they're like, I have this problem. Like, I would love to know a little bit about, what's your process and what are some of the problems that you get that are kind of repetitive?
Well, one thing I would probably show you is this electromagnetic field stimulator, which is, I will use this even when I'm lecturing and let people use it for 3 minutes, and it does things. I mean, you just turn this on. Let's see, I think it's on. Da-da-da-da. And so, for depression, right here, for lungs here, for the shoulder, you can, sync it up, put it on the leg. And it's amazing because it's cleaning up the electromagnetic field around the body. And every cell has an electromagnetic field. So this affects brain cells, bone cells, muscle, nerve, any kind of cell. And it's just astonishing what it can do. Whether it's in even neuropathy, which is where you can't feel the floor and you can have pain and numbness. And this thing just wakes up those cells, and it cleans up the cell membrane, which is the brain of the cell. Yes. And these little pores of the cell are like they are sockets, electromagnetic sockets, but they get caramelized with sugars and proteins as we age, so that they're kind of caramelized, and that's what causes aging and pathology, is that these cells just aren't firing very well. Yeah. So even when people have to have surgery, like that, their cartilage is just really ripped. I say still have a treatment, have some treatments so your body is like a younger person's body that can, flip out of surgery with no problem. Whereas older people, it takes a long time to recover from surgery. Whereas this renovates all that and makes their body alive again. So this thing has been great, just wonderful. And, sometimes I'll do some acupuncture needles and then I'll put this around them. And then there's a synergistic effect together that's really good. Or I can just use this by itself if they, So, and then I use 2 massage tools to begin. I just must use the 2, wands to just get everything relaxed. Even before
My God, more people should be. I mean, I'm very active. I mean, I love physical activity, and I box a lot, and so I at some point I know like I need a good massage. If I could get like a Thai massage that does stretching, my God, even better. It's like heaven. But I know so many people who just, they don't want to be touched. They're self-conscious about their body, sometimes. And I'm just like, and then they're like, my feet are swollen. I'm like, I wonder why. I'm you got nothing moving. You got nothing going. You got the body needs to be moved. It needs to be touched. These things, they're aided by, I mean, if not, do it, maybe try doing it to yourself. Even that would be more beneficial than not having any thing, the lymphatic system needs to be moved. And if people aren't doing the kind of exercise that does it, then massage is the only way it's going to happen. Right.
I really try to tell my patients that the best exercise is dance. Because, I mean, walking is great, but walking is one same move over and over and over. Dance, you're all over the place. Your hips, your legs, the crazier, the better. And then I also say 5 minutes every hour. It's great if you have a big chunk of exercise in the morning or something, but what about the rest of the day? You sit there and you're vegetating, but you got to get up every hour and just shake it up, jumping jacks, knee bends, whatever.
Yeah.
I tell them every time you go to the restroom, just shake it up and then go back and sit. I don't always take my own advice, but I try to do that.
No, it's good. I have a friend who, well, these days less and less people are stuck in an office job. Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately for some, that's been a result of the whole 2020 healthcare crisis, we'll call it. But again, Zach Bush, I don't know. Have you heard of Zach Bush?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Zach has, it's so funny, out of everything that he's done, one of his most famous videos is he developed this. It's like, I think it's a 5-minute workout. And they hooked these people up who are doing this up to everything that you could diagnose them with. And they found that just the 5 minutes of this, and then no matter what state you're in, whether you're, heavier, or, it's just like 30 seconds of squats, 30 seconds of this. It's like, there's part of it that's like very Qigong-ish. There's part of it that's just, it just gets all the blood flowing in the healthiest of ways. And like literally, if you do 5 minutes of it twice, 3 times a day at the start, your whole metabolism begins to shift and change. And I do it when I can, but I'm like, dude, I send it to my friend who's like stuck in an office job or was. I'm like, you could go in the bathroom and do this, because he used to be a big workout guy, and he got stuck in an unhappy marriage, and he works all the time. He supports her kids from a previous relationship, and he's miserable. And it's like he's stuck in a terrible routine. But I'm like, part of and he's having health problems, for a few different reasons. He used to be big, strong, fit guy. And I'm like, just do 5 minutes of this a day. I mean, I'm telling you, you'll have results because your body's just getting stagnant, Stagnation is the enemy. But yeah, I love dance. Totally. I love moving around a lot.
Yes. It's
I want to do it forever.
I tell people, if you say you don't dance or you can't dance, all the more better. just laugh at yourself, just have fun.
Close your eyes if you have to.
Right. Do it in your,
That's
I've danced more in my kitchen and my living room than any place else, by myself.
Yeah.
It's fun.
So tell me about the magnets, Doc, because I have a friend she's apprenticing with them, and I think she tried to use them on me one day.
Fantastic. A group of 4 of us went down to Nicaragua to teach these magnets to the doctors down there, who are all women because they make so little money that men don't bother being doctors. And so we taught them these magnets, and the people down there responded even better than Americans because they're just more clear, they're not quite so distracted, and they were big believers. And so these doctors would bring their patients in, and an hour later they'd show changes in their sugar levels, and their, everything would change, even, according to doctors' measures. And so the magnets are fantastic, and it's a great, simple way to treat yourself every day. And you can either do it with a wand, a magnet stick, or just tape the magnets on to certain points on the body. And works very well. I mean, you can also just put it on places that hurt, but doing it on the hands.
Do you need 2, or do you how is it?
No, you just, you do the north side if you're trying to sedate, and you do the south side if you're trying to stimulate. So
you could use it to heal. You can use it to
reduce pain or stimulate an organ.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah, I'm always like, tell me, like I don't know a lot about it, and she's getting to be well adept at it, and I'm like, she carries her magnets with her now, and she's like, you want me to use my magnets on you? I'm like, I don't know. Is it gonna hurt?
It's a pretty simple thing that I think if someone has a general idea, it could still help you.
Yeah. So these CDs, obviously they must be available in MP3s these days. Since
yes.
I have a CD player, but don't tell anyone. I don't want people to.
I have a turntable. So
oh, nice.
Cylinders from medicine.
Nice.
Yes, I mean I still play CDs, but there's now even automobiles don't have CD players anymore. But
no, they
this
don't.
is available on my website is called brainbodybliss.com. brainbodybliss.com, and on there you can actually purchase the MP3 or the CD, and it's just a very practical way to realize that you have that control to turn yourself on and get high. Use that expression. If that will incentivize people to be centered, and they get to feel better. And then everything else works better because these endorphins, we have 100 receptor sites for endorphins in every one of our 70 trillion cells. So what does that make? 7 zillion receptor sites for feel-good opiates? I mean, that's how much nature wanted us to feel good. Wow. So when you can, but then the more you do it, the more it works. And I find that even myself, if I don't meditate for a few days, it's really hard to get in. It's hard to kind of turn that brain off. But if you do it regularly, then you're not starting at, the 13th floor underneath. You're starting at square 1 or even square, level 10, so that then you can go higher and higher, and your body's ready to do it. But if you haven't done it for a while, then it's hard to get in. And if you do it before you go to sleep at night, then your sleep will be so much richer. And you won't be just rehashing things in your dreams, but your dreams will be much more intuitive and, finding new things. Whereas if you just go to sleep and you're already all pissed off about something, you're going to dream very pissed off dreams probably.
Yeah.
And then in the morning, before you start the day, my most inspiring thought is that every day the whole galaxy moves 31 million miles. The galaxy. I mean, we're moving about 55 million miles because we're moving around the sun. The sun's moving around the galaxy, and then the whole galaxy is moving.
It's all moving, right?
So talk about getting new energies and new influences. Wow. We're in a totally different part of the universe every day.
I never did think about that. It's so true.
So, instead of just saying, oh, it's another Tuesday or it's another April.
No, it's not. You are 54. You are not where you were yesterday, man. The
potential. And to say, well, can I feel that? Well, when you're on an airplane, you don't feel movement. You only feel it when you start or stop. In your car,
Yeah.
you don't feel movement unless you stop. So we're not going to feel it, but whatever it is, when we're really deep inside and we're really centered, whatever we're feeling, that is the feeling of going
Yeah.
5,000 miles a second.
Yeah.
We're so used to it, we don't notice it, but that, we can't pretend that we feel it, but whatever it is we're feeling, that is how you would feel if you were going 5,000 miles a second, which is
What
what we
we
are doing.
can what we can feel is the magnetism coming from the earth, and absolutely the power coming from the sun. And even if you just do that, that's it's a very healthy thing to do, because you're grounding, and so you're, especially if you have bare feet on the earth and the sun is out, and my boy, I unfortunately, I spent the first 9 years of my son's life in New York City, because that's where, I was acting and filmmaking, and I love the theater, and I love New York City for the longest time, and I'm officially divorced from it. But my kids did not grow up. They didn't have a yard. They didn't have a place
Central
to take
Park.
their. I mean, we would go to Central Park, but they never took the shoes off. And now I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, like a bug comes around, and these two kids are. I'm like, you guys, you're showing your city. We're in Georgia now, all right? Like, you got to stop flipping out every time a bug flies by you. You just take your shoes off, go in the yard, and make friends. Okay, and they're getting better. They're getting better, but it's just so funny because
Yeah.
I grew up barefoot in the yard. My mother never had her shoes on, and you just get used to it, and they're not, but they're
Right.
getting used to it now, thank God. But it's just so healthy.
Well, I've been writing another book lately, and it's called Youth Planet, the 60s in a Music Century, the events, escapades, and issues wrapped in music. And a lot of it is, the birth of the teenager, or because they didn't even use that term before the 50s.
Hmm.
But what I talk about is how I grew up in the 50s when there were lots of woods around. You lived in the
Yeah.
suburbs, but you were right on the edge of, in Rhode Island, lots of woods. I played in the woods all the time. Outside Pittsburgh, lots of woods. Every place I lived in had woods. I
Me
went to
too. Yeah.
college in Connecticut, lots of woods. I lived it was like the 18th century for me. And so that importance of being connected to the woods. And then the 60s was all about getting back to the woods, going back to the commune, going back to the Native American traditions, going back to the Old South, going back to the Celtic green world, the music, the Renaissance fair. It was always about getting back to the earth. And, we had the whole earth catalog. And so this sort of got me through COVID periods where I was just at home and I could write this
Yeah.
book, and it was so much fun. And I'm very much into music. So I kind of, described all the things I'm talking about with lyrics. But I just wanted to reinforce that importance of connecting with the soil, like you're saying. And that was a big theme in the 60s that continues today. I mean, it makes me glad when I see all these people going to these national parks. They all want to get there. And it's wonderful to think that is a big draw, that people really do want to get back to Earth.
They do. It makes me want to take I spent so much time in the woods. Growing up in Pennsylvania, deer hunting is a big part of the culture, and my dad was always a hunter, but we were always in the woods. I mean, from the time I was a kid, well before I ever went on a hunt with him, which I did when I was a teenager. But we were always in the woods. He was building tree stands. He was like, "Get out of here!" I had a twin brother, so there was two of us. We looked exactly alike, and my dad was, we would run his patience thin, So he'd be like, he'd be up in a tree stand trying to build a seat for himself, and we'd be like, "Dad, I'm cool." He'd be like, I'm busy here." So we would go off, and we were always off, and we were always climbing trees and playing and running around in the woods, and God, it was so exciting. It was great.
Well, I live in Los Angeles, but I live in a canyon, and I only have one house next to me, and I'm surrounded by trees. But now 3 weeks ago, we had such torrential water that it pulled down 4 gigantic trees. These trees were so tall, and yet because the earth was so shallow, we're on bedrock, so that there was not enough dirt to hold these trees, and they just it was heartbreaking to see this, But still, I have a lot of trees around me. Otherwise, I don't think I could be in the city. I love New York City, and I was just there recently, and it was great to be there. But you're right. I just got to have trees.
Yeah. There's trees on the street, and they're pretty, especially when they're covered in snow for that brief hour before the snow starts to melt and turn into black slush. But it's and not all streets have them, but some do. I wanted to before we get too low on time, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the book you wrote and about this Hindu philosophy and this man who you wrote about, and what drew you to him, and because his work sounds fascinating, but I had never heard of him.
Well, he wrote one book, which is sort of an underground classic called Mount Analog. And it's a very short story, but it's just exquisite. It's like a little jewel of a book of these seekers that are seeking this invisible mountain that's only available to true seekers, and that you can only find it at a certain time of the month and a certain,
What's
so
it called?
That book was his most famous book. It's called Mount Analog. Mount Analog. And so Domal is, relative, pretty much unknown, but anyone that does know him either loves him or they've never heard of him. Rarely do you hear of anyone that's read his stuff that says, he's greatly loved. And I was invited to speak at the French, his centennial. And I heard that Patti Smith was going to be there, and she had just been on the front cover of Le Monde magazine because she was having an art show of all her photographs of famous men's things. And so I heard she was going to have a party. So I went prepared with my book and one of my most activist issues that I wanted her to help us with. And I walk in and she says, "Kathleen, I can't believe you're here. I love your book. I read it. It's in tatters, and I just had it FedExed over. And I love your book, and I love your political work." And so together we put on this great party in this little cafe where Domal had originally met the Gurdjieff people back in 1930. And so we together, she's playing guitar, and I'm reading his poetry in French, and we had this great time. But in other words, she just loved Domal and is continued to do things about him, put on some shows, I think, in New York about him. But because he was researching drugs back in 1920 because he wasn't out there for fun. He wanted to explore the mind. And so he was trying all these things. And then he starts learning Sanskrit. And my favorite quote is, when he talked about Rasa and the collection of his essays on Hindu subjects is called Rasa, R-A-S-A. It was published, I think, by SUNY Press, as my book was published by SUNY Press. And it's all about, being in the moment when you're creating art or creating something or observing it. And so Rasa can be found in every breath. And this is from a Upanishad. So this is from 500 BC. Rasa can be found in every breath if it is sought. Who would inhale? Who would exhale if this ether were not joy? Joy here is the deity himself, the essential excitant of rasa. So in other words, they're saying our baseline should be joy. Every breath, when we take a breath with intention, and there has to be some intention there. If you're paying attention to your breath, and of course, the word respiration comes from re-spiriting. When you breathe with attention, you are re-spiriting your whole body. you're sending spirit or chi or prana, whatever you want to call this special stuff that's out there. When you breathe with intention, you pull down this vital force that we can call chi or spirit or prana. So there, he's saying that when you breathe with that, you're feeling joy, you're feeling and I translated it as deity, but it was really the goddess, that's the goddess herself, of the world, So in other words, when that to me inspired me so much, who would inhale, who would exhale if this ether were not joy? So that every time you just breathe, even 2 breaths, you're turning yourself on. You're getting that joy. You're getting those endorphins. They didn't know the word endorphins, but they knew the word joy. So you're making yourself feel good, and that is your duty. That's not like self-indulgence. No, your duty is to feel good so that your body will work better and you can be a better citizen.
Human. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's true. And can you imagine if they taught young people this? I mean, the world would be, it would be a different place. I mean, the world would, we have this, we call it an education system, and that's a stretch. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Yeah. I've lost all faith in it.
Yeah, I think it's the bottom line for stopping war and stopping pillaging and stopping stealing, because if you felt good in your own body, in your own skin, you wouldn't need to take from someone else.
No, they'd be happy to give it to you. We would be providing, because we would understand that there is no least of us.
Right.
And if there is, then it's our responsibility to make them part of us. We would make sure that we had systems in place. There would be the homeless problem would be solved. It wouldn't be growing worse.
We wouldn't be doing drugs like that. We wouldn't be taking Oxycontin or whatever it is.
No, there wouldn't. I mean, there's a lot of factors at play, and people are being, I don't subscribe to a victim mentality, but there is free will, and then there is the manipulation of free will, and what we're seeing, I think, happen a lot in our society is, in a manipulation of free will, and that's how people end up victimized. They end up addicted to these substances because they should have never been on them to begin with. They were put on by companies that lied about their effects, that lied about their addictive qualities. And those companies aren't being taken to task. They're not being held responsible. Alex Jones is being held responsible because he said that he thought that what went on in Sandy Hook was not, he stated, which was obviously a mistake. And it's costing him his life and his fortune. I mean, and all his money. He's being held personally responsible. The Purdue family knowingly peddled, faked, and frauded science and addicted millions of people to Oxycontins and painkillers. And they did so knowingly, and they lied about it. Are they being held personally responsible? They hurt and killed people. They didn't just talk about people who were hurt and killed in a way that was an error. Mm-hmm. They're not being personally held liable. Their company has declared bankruptcy, and they're walking off scot-free, the billionaires that they are. That's the world that we live in. And tell me how that's fair.
Yeah, you're right. No, that's a good point. I never thought of it that, But yeah, the Sacklers,
the Sacklers, another family.
Yeah.
DuPonts. Basically every household name, they've, and it's not, look, if they found out afterwards that their product was hurting people, I would understand. But what's consistently coming to light is that they knew, and they knew for decades, and they hid what they knew, and they continued to find ways that they thought were creative in hiding them that hurt more people because they were dispersing it. It's atrocious. And it's like, there has to be a responsibility. There has to be accountability, it's, or else this society is going to continue to go down and not up. Mm-hmm. So, and then you have people like Alex Jones who are attempting to bring accountability to people, and they are bastardized, and a target is put on them, and they're made to seem like the devil incarnate. And I'm like, and I don't really have an opinion about Alex Jones. I feel bad for him because he was, when he was exposing George Bush and the post 9/11, he was receiving awards, but
Right.
the media, which is obviously slightly skewed left, mainstream media, was that he was a darling he had a brief stint, but then the president, it switched and the Democrats were in power and he continued to expose the corruption, and they were like, this guy is a fucking enemy number one,
Well, he just
and they
went
went
too
after him.
far.
Yeah,
He dug up a lot of dirt that needed to be dug up, but then he just went too
yeah,
far. Just
yeah. He pissed a lot of people off. I mean, he even snuck into Bohemian Grove. He got video. I mean, like, I'm like, dude, it's a
wow.
miracle this dude is alive. No one had ever done that, because everyone always wanted to know what was in Bohemian Grove. That's been going on for like forever, up probably closer to you, I think near San Francisco. You
Yes,
know
and
about Bohemian Grove, right? Yeah.
it's funny because after living outside the country for 7 years, or outside of LA, because I was in the Caribbean for 2 years and England for 2 years, my ex-husband went to medical school after 20 years of doing
Mm.
acupuncture. He decided to go to medical school. So we had 2 years amazing in the Caribbean and then 2 years in England. So I came back and some friends say, "Oh, we're going to this place called the Bohemian Grove. They're opening it to the public one night because they've been picked on so much for never having it open." So I went there for all this great music and didn't even know what I was at until later. I discovered, oh my God, I was at
Oh
the
yeah, they had to do a lot of damage control after
yeah.
Jones got in and showed they had this child I mean, it was
Who
a
knows?
doll, but it was a child sacrifice theatrical. I mean, it's just crazy
Right.
what they were doing. Devil worship, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just theatrical. It was like yeah. Alex Jones was so scared that he like ran out. I mean, it's bad when he's like, "We got to get out of here. This is crazy." Um, but
Well,
so your CDs, your MP3s are available on your website. People can download.
yes,
So like, I'm always looking. I'm like you. I need to spend at least 15 minutes. If I can do 45 minutes an hour, is a great day. But it's few and far between right now with the kids in school and the commute that we have.
well, it's great
But
for insomnia because I always tell people, if you just do this breathing for a few minutes, don't be, it's actually more efficient for fixing your body, which is what sleep does. Hours of sleep is your
yeah,
body is repairing, but that 15 minutes or 5 minutes or even 3 minutes of that
it gets
is
me
more
by.
efficient for doing that. And so don't say to yourself, oh, is it working yet? Is it working yet? Am I going to sleep? No, just do that and it will put you to sleep. But if you
Hmm.
don't go to sleep, just know that you're doing something that is more efficient. 5 minutes
Yeah,
of that is worth an hour of sleep.
that's how I
So
get by, honestly.
yeah,
Because some nights I'll get 5.5, 6 hours tops, and I'm not quite as young, and I'm not quite the bouncy ball I used to be. Shit, I used to be able to go like 2, 3 nights, but like, who needs sleep
I could never.
now? Now I do that, and I'm like, somebody just put me out of my misery. No, I can't do that anymore at all. But my, like I'm like hurting, but I'll sit and I'll do a half hour, and then I'm like human, again. I feel like I can exist in this world and not, have to put myself out for a 2 hour nap,
Mhm.
but so I'm always looking for new, like I use a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza's guided meditations. I mix it up because you got to mix it up. It's like, and
Sure.
sometimes I'll just do silence, but a lot of heart coherence entrainment. I know how good for the body that is, to be able to practice and achieve that. And so I'm always looking for new meditations, and I'm anxious to check yours out
Okay.
um, and take it for a ride.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if people need to talk to me, I don't know how to share that information, but I
You
am
send
available.
me. I'll include everything in my video description for you.
That'd be
Yeah,
nice.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure to do that. So people can check out your stuff. Maybe they'll want to talk to you. I know I'm going to check out the meditation because I love those. Yeah, we'll make sure people can connect to you and your work. And if I'm ever on your coast, which I do intend to be, I'll have to give you a shout and look you up, and maybe you can look at my ears and tell me, and my tongue, and tell me what's going on with me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That'd be
Under
cool.
the tongue is really important too. And you look at the bottom of the tongue. Do we have blue lines, which almost everyone does? Not great. Blue. It's like no oxygen. So there's lots of
I
funny
hope I
things
don't. I don't
with
think I do.
the tongue.
It's funny.
Well,
My
we
wife is always.
stay in touch with you. I think I only have the other person's, but I don't have your email. So you got mine.
I do. I have yours. I'll email you my personal email. But before I let you go, you got to let me take you at least a little far out, right?
Okay.
I'm sure. So, have you had an experience? I'm sure I have a feeling that you have, but have you had an experience that it was like completely, like unbelievable, like one that you're like, I just can't. No one's going to believe me if I tell them this happened. Like maybe you saw something or experienced a supernatural, a synchronicity of sorts.
Well, probably
That you
many
would
times
share.
in my life because I had the Catholic, heavy duty religious experiences as a child where, if I just be alone in the church or alone in the chapel, that was the best place to be. And, even then there would be, this kind of energies happening.
Mm,
I don't know, it's just hard to describe, but sometimes I would just really feel my whole body as if my brain had really penetrated my whole body. Like I was
mm,
feeling and thinking in my hands and feet, and the whole body was thinking. And I think that is what you kind of look toward, to get to really wake up the intelligence in every cell so that you feel like your brain has really spread its tentacles everywhere.
mm-hmm.
I think that's most I can think of right now.
Yeah.
But meditation, it is amazing how you feel like entities are sharing with you.
Yeah.
And I feel the ancestors. Of all the
Oh
people,
yeah.
I can quite understand what's the big deal. But today happens to be 8 years since my mother passed. And
Oh.
she died at 95 years old. So she'd be like 103.
Mm,
And, I've been really feeling her energy today. And, I think when I'm treating patients, if I really breathe, I can pull in help from my parents and from
mm,
those that are in 100% spirit, because we're 99.999%
yeah.
spirit. We're 100%, and I will just feel like I'm just like a little Merryweather, like the little
Mm-hmm.
fairy hanging on the human being. I just feel so much energy. And I feel like that when I'm treating someone with inflammation, that as soon as I get to that place where it hurts, I get filled with energy, but it's not bad energy. I'm not taking off
Right.
negative. It just becomes good energy for me, and I'm pulling their energy off of them that they
Mm-hmm.
don't need, the pain. And so that is, to me, just such an experience. I get so
Oh
energized
yeah.
with patients. And it used to be
I,
they'd say, oh, you have to wash your hands. You don't want to get that negative energy. I don't know. I somehow just transfer it into, Einstein says that energy is energy. It's
yeah.
negative, positive. So that's why I try to get people to use their negative thoughts as fuel. It's
Yeah.
composted energy that is really powerful. So turn pain into power.
Yeah. It can be metabolized. It can be transmuted. You know.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned that. I was meditating this morning, and I lost my brother January 21st.
Oh,
Um,
your twin brother?
no, not my twin, my older brother.
Oh,
He was 49. And yeah, I miss him. And sometimes when I'm meditating and I'm just feeling into my body and my heart. And, right before he died, we had a moment when he recognized me and he gave me a big hug, and then, I'll never forget that moment when he gave me that hug. And, I feel him sometimes, you know, I'm like in total, I'm like really deep into meditation, and it's just this blissful nothing, you know, and then all of a sudden I feel his arms around me, you know, I feel him giving me a hug. And,
Well, he's more accessible now than he was in his dense body.
yeah, it's amazing. It's just, you know, I always think like I was in a state that was just completely open and feeling into gratitude and love. And of course, you know, there he is. I just looked where I was sitting when I felt him give me a hug. I don't know why. But it's amazing. And I think that it's like, you know, the more we can clear and get into our bodies and let the mind clear and just into the unknown, into this kind of this space of nothing, you know, and then things can come in. But first you have to kind of clear, right? But before you go, I want to ask you if you could share one bit of wisdom with the loyal and loving listeners who have stayed with us this far. I always, you know, I talk a lot about programming on my podcast and how we are essentially a product of our programs, and whether we got good ones or bad ones, sometimes it doesn't come out until later, right? But I feel like shows like this and people all over the earth are attempting to enter some code into the consciousness of humanity that will help them function better. You know, like a computer, like, okay, this is much better than the other one. The other one was all bugged out. And I was wondering if you could offer some code for people who are listening that might help them on their journey.
I'm sort of repeating myself, but I think that this message of turning pain into power, give up your pain. We're addicted to pain in our Western culture, you know, of like, it's got to be conflict, it's got to be ugly. And so we're so into that we forget that we don't have to live that way, but we can turn that, our natural tendency to turn, you know, to really just stick with our pain, like, this is what I've gone through, and, you know, my story, and turn that into power. Just, you know, turn it, all that composted stuff that we've got right here, blow it out with that meditation, and just blow it out. But you're not dumping it. You're transforming it from negative to neutralized to positive.
Yeah. Transmuting it. Yeah. I love that. That's great. Thank you so much, Kathleen. I appreciate your time. I'm so glad that Hunter found you. He was absolutely right when he said you're going to want to talk to her. I enjoyed our conversation so much. And I'm going to include everything for people to reach out to you in my video description. And I'm going to send you an email from my personal email. And thank you so much for taking some time and sharing your work and your wisdom with me. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
You take care. Have a good night.
Good night.